Welcome to the Story 516 podcast, where we sit down with Christians from across denominations and talk about how God is at work in the world today and inspire you to see God at work in your own life in new ways. Well, welcome back to the Story 516 podcast. I'm joined today by Pastor Ben Bigaouette. He's a pastor at Triumph Lutheran Brethren Church in Moorhead, Minnesota. Ben, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate you having me, and you are definitely one of the first to correctly pronounce my last name.
Okay.
Unprompted. That was very good.
Sweet. 10 points for Zach today. Over the last year now, I've gotten to know you a little bit better, kind of working at Triumph on a very part-time basis, but found out kind of your background and working with Bible camp, and that was an area I haven't had the chance to interview someone and talk to them about time at Bible camp, and that, at least growing up in the area of the country we do, that tends to be a very big part of people who grow up within the church, being able to go to different Bible camps. We have some really fantastic ones in Minnesota and North Dakota. So I was curious if first you could just give us a little bit, like a mini bio, like who are you?
Yeah. Well, name's Ben. I'm born and raised Minnesotan. Proud to be a Minnesotan. Minnesota sports fan. That's the hard part of my life is witnessing so much heartbreak. I don't know how much more a guy can take, but I'm hanging in there.
Right.
The only time I left the state was in my undergrad. I went to college at NDSU up in the Fargo-Moorhead area up here, and I really felt led to. I wanted to be a social studies teacher and a basketball coach.
Nice.
And so I just had a lot of teachers who left great impressions on me, coaches the same way. I wanted to be that and do that for somebody else. And so I graduated with my undergrad in social studies ed and basketball coaching with a history minor and moved to the Twin Cities area, got married, and both my wife and I taught at a private Christian school. I taught there for 3 years with her. And it was awesome. It was great. Just had a wonderful time making connections with students and getting to do what I was trained to do. And it was during that time we were connected to a Lutheran Brethren congregation in Bloomington, Minnesota. And the pastor there just kind of got connected with us. And as we were attending, he took us out for lunch one day and he asked me, he's like, "Hey, Ben, have you ever thought of full-time ministry?" Honestly, no, not really a whole lot. He goes, well, maybe you should think about that. And got really specific with even thinking about that in terms of joining the team at that church. And so took the better part of a year and a half to really pray through and process that, and made the decision to move to Fergus Falls, Minnesota, where our seminary is located, to begin seminary. And that was a 3-year degree. And I've been serving as a pastor in full-time ministry for the last 8 years, ever since 2016. And so served congregations in both Bloomington, Minnesota, and now up here in the Moorhead area. Like I said, I'm married, been married for 13 years, and we got 3 kiddos, so life is full and fun and everything you can about imagine with that.
So that's a crazy, just having random lunch and someone just speaking into your life and kind of affirming gifts that they see in you. But I did want to kind of pivot and look towards Bible camp, because I know at one point you had a role at Inspiration Point Bible Camp, which is a camp in Minnesota. And I really wanted to kind of get your take on like what led you there. Yeah, I guess what led you there first?
Inspiration Point Bible Camp, originally located in Clitheroe, Minnesota, kind of between Alexandria and Fergus Falls. Their new location is more in that Vining, Henning area.
Okay.
They had to move locations due to some flooding, kind of an unfortunate thing. But
when you live in the land of 10,000, like
they're bound to run over. But it ended up being a very good move for them. So, no, I started. My family first got connected to iPoint in the summer of 1991. So I would have been like 2 years old.
Okay.
And they are our denomination's Bible camp. And so as my parents got connected to my home church, they were promoting family camp. And so I went as a 2-year-old as a family camper with my family, and we never missed a summer. So camp was just always a part of my life. It was always a part of my summer. And so that usually meant I got to go twice. I got to go as a family camper, and then when I was 3rd grade and up, I got to go also as a youth camper. And so summer of 1998 was my first summer
nice
as a youth camper. And I never missed a year until I got married, and then I think there was a year or two we missed. But even today, I'm invited back there to speak. My family goes to family camp. I spent 4 summers serving out there on their summer staff, both as they called it service corps, so doing the dishes, cleaning bathrooms, hanging out with the kids, and then my last 2 summers were as a summer counselor, where I got to oversee cabins of 8 guys and spend the week with them. And those were some really formidable years for me. But I just loved my connection there. I remember my first year as a youth camper, we were leaving camp end of the week, and we didn't even make it down the long gravel driveway, and I started to cry, convulsing, shoulders heaving, and the driver was kind of wanting to be reassuring. He's like, "Ben, it's okay. You'll be home soon and see your parents," that whole thing. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm not crying because I was homesick. I'm crying because I didn't want to leave.
Right.
And so this place had just made such an impression on me. And so I told myself at that point, man, I want to make sure I'm connected to this place and this thing as many times as much as I can. So iPoint has been just a big part of my life and continues to be, thankfully.
Yeah. Kind of as your time working for the school, working at camp, and now as a pastor, do you find that sentiment where a person experiences something and it's just such a positive, impactful experience that it almost identifies them as these are my people, or this is something I want to be a part of?
Yeah, I do think that's true. I think, summer camp especially, I think you can call those are easy mountaintop experiences for young people. They're formidable opportunities. I was just recently listening to the director and his wife talk about this, where there's a few recipes that just cement summer camp as a really important place for people in general, not just young people, but the idea of you're out in creation, you're out in enjoying the outdoors, seeing what God has made and created. You're usually away from technology, so they don't have you turn in your phone, at the beginning of the week as a youth camper, and even as staff, we don't have our phones with us. They were maybe your alarm clock, but that was about it. You'd open them on the weekends. Oh, who bugged me or who texted me? Who do I need to call? And then you're with like-minded people, for the most part, fellow brothers and sisters in the Lord, and so that shared experience really creates some deep bonds and connections. So even to this day, I met my wife. We both worked out at Inspiration Point, so I met her on staff. And then most of the people today that I would consider my best friends, I either met at Bible camp or worked together with them at Bible camp. So, when you say this is my community, this is my people, I want to be around this, I think all of those things really kind of play into that.
Yeah. So then as your time working at the camp, you said you started off in the service corps doing more, I guess, what people would maybe call mundane tasks, or the grunt work, dirty work that no one wants to do. And then eventually, over the course of a few summers, transitioned to being a camp counselor. I was curious, because our MO here is to talk about how we see God at work in the world today. So you kind of have almost 2 different views. Yeah, you have 2 different vantage points from the topic of camp, of where you've maybe seen God working. So I would love to hear kind of any stories or experiences you've had where you really saw God show up.
Yeah, that's great. Obviously God is at work all over in every situation, but I can honestly say that some of the times that I most clearly saw him at work were when I was out serving at Inspiration Point. Even more recently, the weeks I'm out there speaking, what you get to see and experience is so unique and just seemingly different from everyday life. And again, that's not saying that God isn't at work in everyday life, but it was just really, so I kind of saw some both big and small ways, when we're kind of doing the behind the scenes stuff, every night there'd be a meeting that we would have as a support staff, and we'd have all these prayer requests that the counselors would give throughout the day for us to pray about. They'd be things going on in their cabins and different dynamics with the kids, or specific situations with a certain student, or just the ways that they're hoping the Lord would work in their group that week. And so we got to pray for them every night, and then every night we'd receive updates. And so you would literally see prayer answered whether it was in the scope of a day or in the scope of a week. And so I remember there was one time in particular, there was a student, I think it was a 5th or 6th grade week. This young man had arrived and was a first-time camper, was super nervous, and the first, like right after registration, had lost his sleeping bag. Just misplaced it. It was nowhere. We literally there were search parties all over camp looking for this missing sleeping bag. And I say this in the sense that that's such a small thing. Like you think like, oh, a sleeping bag, it's no big deal. But for this little kid, like this was like ruining the start of what you hope to be a really important, influential week for him. And so I remember we spent most of the day, that first day, looking for this sleeping bag. Wasn't turning up. We prayed about it. We're like, Lord, show us where this sleeping bag is. This is I know it's not a huge thing, but help us find it. And inexplicably, this thing shows up on the kid's bed. We talk, who found it? Where did it come? Like it was put there. To this day, don't know where it came from. And so you look at and then the week that kid was able to have with that distraction removed,
right?
Of I don't have to worry about my sleeping bag. I can zone in and have fun and learn about Jesus and enjoy the week. Seeing God work in small, seemingly mundane ways like that to influence people. I remember even thinking about just working there and going throughout a whole summer with. You think of the amount of strenuous stuff you're doing and maybe not getting the most sleep and in community and sharing all these things. Like, I'm surprised more people didn't get sick.
Right.
Like, not that people didn't have colds and things like that, but like overall, just the overall health of people. God sustaining those of us that were working out there, giving us the energy and the rest and the health that we needed to do what needed to be done. Again, you kind of take it for granted, like,
right.
But how that wasn't more impactful. It was just amazing.
Yeah. So did you find kind of, like you were saying, being away from technology, kind of being outside of the, I guess, normal rhythms of life that we get used to, was it easier to maybe notice some of those more mundane ways that God shows up, kind of when you are forced to be out, like you're not in those patterns, so like you're maybe seeing things from a fresh perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think two things come to mind. One is, when you're disconnected from the distractions of the world or the things that I would typically spend my time doing if I had a down moment, I'm able to notice and see things and hear things differently, and I know that's intentional. That's why they do that, to remove any distractions so you can focus on the main thing. And I also think what was also helpful is being with a like-minded group. You had people who also would point out and remind you of these things, like, hey guys, have you thought of we prayed for safety this week and God kept us safe. Like on my own, I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that unprompted, but oh, you know what? He did. And where else? Oh, he also gave us this week.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I mean, that's a great reminder of why community is so important and being around like-minded people, because we don't all have the same tendencies to think of certain things. Like I have friends who connect with God, I think, on a more, maybe we could describe it, emotional level. Myself, I probably feel a little more connected if I'm out in nature, kind of like you're describing at camp. If we stay in community, then they'll bring up those times where it's like, oh, I really noticed God in this way. And it's like, man, I never would have thought about that in myself. Like my brain is wired in completely a different way, but it's so cool. I mean, that was, honestly, you're getting at the heart of part of why this podcast exists, is to talk to people who think differently. Because each person's unique and will perceive things slightly differently. So hearing how everyone's seeing God at work kind of gets me thinking, and I think starts to push you outside of your norms of how you normally think. So maybe next time I find that missing sock, I'll be like, wait, this reminds me of the time that the kid at camp lost his sleeping bag. And well, thanks God, you've removed this distraction in my life and just get you thinking in a different way. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting to think the biggest lesson there personally, and I know many of us had that takeaway, was so oftentimes when you think of the way God works, it's in the big obvious ways, like the cure for this illness or providing this monetary need. And that is true, but like just the humbling reality that God cares about the little stuff too, and he's involved in the details. And it's like, that's just a reassuring, refreshing thing with any of those things that happen in our everyday life, like you said.
Yeah. So with being a camp counselor, had you seen, I'm guessing you've seen like kids come back year after year. How is that seeing like the growth? Because you're seeing it in like glimpses rather than a consistent, like, I'm your youth pastor, I see you every week. You're seeing them maybe like 2-3 times a year at most. I guess what's that like? I don't have a lot of people. Like maybe I guess the closest is like distant relatives, and you see them at a family reunion, and maybe if there's like a wedding or something during the year. But that's like a really interesting element, seeing a kid kind of in their formative years like that. I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I remember I always looked forward to kind of seeing people repeatedly every year. You just knew that if there was a certain age group coming up, like, oh, I wonder if I'll see so-and-so, or, oh, I know so-and-so's coming this week and they were in my cabin last year, or, oh, it'd be fun if they could be in my cabin this year. And you're right, like seeing their growth take place. And it's a really privileged, humbling position to be in, because you see them grow in a week's time. And again, with all of the recipe for growth and success that is out at a place like an Inspiration Point, like you see that exponential growth that would take, weeks or months back home, and you're seeing that real time, really perpetuated by just all the stuff God's doing. And so, yeah, it's a really humbling, privileged position to see and be a part of their growth and have them ask you questions and be there to pray with them. I mean, I can think of the kids that got to have really important conversations with and just point them to the truth of God's word and the character of who Jesus is and his love for them, and to see the light bulb click or the things come together, or just the renewed confidence that they had in going back home into whatever situation, good, bad, or otherwise, that it was, just knowing that, wow, they're leaving with some really important things that they were able to be convinced of and take away here and kind of leave transformed or renewed.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like a lot of the festivals and celebrations in the Old Testament that God told the Israelites to do, almost like take these times to remind yourself, renew your energy. Yeah, I guess reminders are really important. And it's kind of like summer camp is, it seems like it's very similar in that regard for a lot of people. So did you see a lot of non-believers come to Bible camp?
Yeah, there were always a fair amount, and a couple of reasons. One, it was something to do, or like
Right.
if summer, you're right, summer camp up here is kind of a cultural thing. So, well, I went to summer camp, so you are too,
Right.
that kind of thing.
But I'm sure a lot of people who have like Christian friends, like, I mean, growing up, like Inspiration Point or I Point as we call it, like I've never, like, it's all rave. Like everyone's like raving about it all the time. The weeks when like the camp directors would come to Triumph here, and like sometimes they would speak in Sunday school, sometimes they would preach, always like a highlight kind of week that everyone got super excited and pumped for. So I'm sure there is some of that where it's like, oh, my friend keeps talking about this one camp that he goes to, and like I've been to camp, but it's nowhere, it's nothing like that. So I'm sure there's interest, kind of like seeds of interest planted.
Totally. Yeah. Invitations were huge. The Christian friend from school or church that, I've got somebody I'd love to go with, whether it's a teammate or a classmate or a friend. And then when they get there, for anybody, believer or non-believer, it's just fun. This is a fun place to be. And so even for someone who's a non-believer or even not interested in Christianity, it's still a fun, safe place to be. That's really positive and safe and good. And so, for them, it's kind of, you hope the byproduct of the gospel that's in everything is going to get the hooks in them a little bit. But yeah, definitely fair amount of non-believers that would come every summer.
Cool. If someone's like even thinking about camp, I mean, we're not being sponsored by iPoint or anything, but if someone's thinking about going to Bible camp, like how would you, I guess, pitch it to a young person or even an older person who's thinking about like, hey, I don't have a summer job, I'd be curious about helping, like even like the kitchen area where it's like someone be like, I don't really want to do kitchen work, but it really, like, as I'm talking to you, like, I know this is an audio podcast, but I'm seeing the joy and excitement in your face, even when we're talking about like working in the kitchen, taking out the trash, washing dishes, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, for someone looking just to attend, especially like a young person or a student, it's like, man, like you're gonna have fun, but it's gonna be fun with a purpose, and it's gonna be in an amazing community of people that you can grow deep and have deep connections and relationships with, and build lasting friendships. I mean, I know that personally from my own experience, and especially if you're someone who's looking to grow in your faith specifically. Like you're going to get the tools and the time and the space to do that, and that's what they pride themselves on. They say, "We give you time and space to get to know Jesus and to know His place in your life." And so, and then even speaking out of experience for someone who is wanting a summer job or something to a way to connect with camp in the summertime on staff. It's like, oh, absolutely. I think of all of the tools that I employ in my role as a pastor every day. So many of those I discovered and honed and was given experience to grow in at camp, whether it's relating to other people, relating to students, talking about Jesus. I grew so much personally in my own faith and in my own just personality there that I'm indebted to that place. It's one of the things like when the pastor sits down and says, "Ben, have you ever thought about full-time ministry?" The answer is no, but like camp's the place where I discovered those gifts, and they were brought out and able to be used in a way that I don't know that I would have naturally discovered in another way. And so for people, like, that could be your story. Not that you're going to be in full-time ministry when you work out there, but you're a part of something bigger than yourself, with a grander purpose and vision that God has for you and for other people. And so what better place to spend 3 months just giving, serving, but also receiving.
Yeah.
A lot of byproducts that you don't even realize until afterwards.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. The older I get, the more I think when I was younger, everyone would be like, "Oh yeah, like generosity, like other people focus, like that's where everything is." And I'd be like, "Yeah, right. I want people to focus on me." But younger Zach, I wish I had a time machine to just go back and kind of just be like, "Hey dude, you're wrong." Like it is true. Like getting in a place of like-minded people where you can serve others is absolutely incredible and has been life-changing for me in like other contexts than camp, but camp as well for yourself and many, many, many others. Thanks, Ben, for joining us today and talking about your experience at camp and being around like-minded people, kind of getting away from a lot of the distractions, and just kind of reminding us how important those things, little kind of getaways or places where we can remove those distractions are, especially in our formative years.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate the opportunity, and blessings on your future conversations here. This is great.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for joining us. You can support the show by going to our Patreon page at patreon.com/story516. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We look forward to seeing you next time.